Hi students, welcome to HSC Biology and Module 5, Heredity. This is video number 2 and we're going to be contrasting internal and external fertilization. Our learning intention with this video is to explain some of the mechanisms of reproduction that ensure continuity of the species by analysing sexual and asexual methods of reproduction in a variety of organisms. And in this particular video, looking specifically at animals in terms of the advantages of external and internal fertilization. In terms of success criteria, it's probably important to make sure that you know how to contrast internal and external fertilization, that you can identify some advantages of each type, and I guess most importantly, or at the deepest level, to be able to evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of internal and external fertilization on the continuity of species. Now, there's a number of different types of ways that animals reproduce, and we're going to be looking in a couple of videos' time at a lot more detail around mammal reproduction in particular. But what we do want to focus on in this video is specifically sexual reproduction. And in order to focus on sexual reproduction, what we need to do is we need to look at gamete formation. And gametes are produced in the process of meiosis. And again, meiosis is hopefully a word you're already familiar with, but one which we will look at in a little bit more detail as we go further through this particular module. Fertilization involves the fusion of sperm and egg. So when the sperm and the egg unite and the genetic material becomes part of a single cell, that's that process of fertilization, formation of a zygote. The main advantage when we're talking about the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction is that sexual reproduction increases the variation, and this is the raw material upon which natural selection operates. So sexual reproduction produces offspring or daughter cells that are different from both of their parent cells, and so as each of the generations continue, we increase this degree of variation. One consequence of sexual reproduction over asexual reproduction is slower reproductive rates. So when we talked about asexual reproduction, things like bacteria can reproduce generations every 20 minutes or so. That is obviously a much slower process for organisms that reproduce sexually. Now, for those that do produce sexually, and again, remember this video is focusing specifically on animals, there are two main strategies and ones that we want to have a little bit of a look at in a bit more detail, and that is internal and external fertilization. So whereabouts is it that the sperm and the egg meet? To just make that very clear, fertilization is the formation of a zygote. So two different gametes, an egg and a sperm, brought together in order for the nuclei to basically fuse, become a single nucleus that is part of a single cell. And that cell is going to divide, produce 2 or 4 or 8, and so on as the organism develops. The sperm need to have a liquid medium in which they can swim. Their mode of locomotion is swimming. They have tails that allow them to swim through a liquid medium, and therefore that liquid medium has to be present in order for the sperm to move from the male to the female. Now, this can actually occur within the body, both within the body of the male and the body of the female, or it can occur outside. Now, obviously, if it occurs outside, then the fluid or liquid medium that needs to be provided may already be present in that external environment, which is why we find a lot of aquatic organisms do use this process of external fertilization. But for organisms that live on land, for terrestrial organisms, there's not the same opportunities for them to do this form of external fertilization. That's not to say no terrestrial living organisms don't do that, because they do. But there's more challenges associated with that. And so therefore modifications that allowed for internal fertilization were favoured as we look at certainly certain types of groups like the birds and the mammals. So let's look firstly at external fertilization. As I said, this is most common in aquatic species. So organisms that live in water have that ready-made fluid medium. So they're already able to give the sperm the opportunity to swim away from the male and towards the eggs deposited by the female. In order to avoid too much wastage, and one of the things that we do need to be aware of is that in external fertilization, a huge number of gametes are released. And this is because there's no guarantee that any individual gamete is going to fuse with another in order to form an individual, a new individual. And so there's a lot of wastage. And one of the ways of trying to overcome some of that wastage is through mating rituals. So this is more common for organisms like fish and less common for organisms like corals, for example, that are just going to release their eggs into the atmosphere, clams, those sorts of things. One of the other partners of external fertilization is low parental care. So usually when the eggs are fertilized externally, both the gametes are released from the body of the parents and they don't do very much to care for them after that. Now, of course, there are exceptions, but we can usually associate external fertilization with limited or no parental care. This is not the case for internal fertilization. There had to be some much more specific modifications to the bodies of individuals or species that were going to favor this mode of reproduction. So as a contrast, it is more common in terrestrial species. It requires that fluid medium for the sperm to move, for the sperm to swim, because unlike an aquatic environment, that's not readily available in the terrestrial environment. Usually that happens in the body of the female, so that there are structures within the female that allow for the sperm to meet the egg at some point. In order to help that process, males may have a copulatory organ that can be helped to direct the sperm into the body of the female, and often they will also have a fluid medium that they provide in addition to the sperm in order to, again, help to facilitate that fluid medium for the sperm to travel. One of the things that we do find is a huge disparity in the number of gametes that are produced. So while males produce huge numbers of sperm, females produce less eggs. And usually that's because there's a level of control that the female has over the number of eggs, over their fertilization, and also over their development and whether or not they're going to put much into the area of parental care. And we do find that parental care increases, obviously to a very large extent for some mammal species that adopt this particular method of internal fertilization. Again, if you're going to try and have a system where the male and the female are going to need to be very close in order for the sperm to reach the egg, then breeding behaviors become important as well, making sure that you can find a receptive mate, one that is of your species, one that is going to give your gametes the best chance of survival when they are partnered. And so therefore breeding behaviors can be very, very important in species that adopt this whole idea of internal fertilization. And we can see a lot of breeding behaviors amongst a large number of mammal groups. And also if you think about birds as well, a lot of different types of breeding behaviors, either for just the purpose of one-off mating, for control of a group, or for organisms that pair for life. And there's examples of those throughout the animal kingdom. Because it takes a lot more energy to go through this process, particularly if we add parental care on top, then there can be fewer offspring. And so therefore, when you're looking at analysing the processes or the relative successes of external and internal fertilisation, the success is to be able to get the genes from one generation into another. So that means you need them to not only be present in adults of the next generation, but you need them to be passing those genes on to future generations as well. No one can live forever, so we need our genes to continue to live on beyond us. So each of these strategies is about the movement of genes from one generation to the next. The two main strategies for that then are very large numbers and work on the basis of probability, or much smaller numbers, and increase the energy, increase the care, the parental care, both before and after birth, that you lavish on children or offspring in order to make sure that they get their very best chance of survival. What I suggest you do with this, as with many other things that we look at in this early section on heredity, is to put together a comparison table. Some of the advantages and disadvantages for internal and external fertilization will help you see some similarities and differences between them, and also help you to structure an answer which includes as much detail as possible. Thanks for watching.